بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. First of all, before getting to the heart of the subject, I would like to start by saying why I decided to make this video. After seeing some videos that are shared on social media on which it is explained that what is happening to us today would be a divine punishment which would only target a group of people, a community, or members of a particular religion. I think we should be wary and not to accept these overly simplistic explanations, especially when they are uttered in the name of a religion which has raised debates to the highest level on practically all subjects in the past. Even if some try to deny these historical facts, the manuscripts are there to testify to the richness of these debates, thank God. A parenthesis that I close. So I finally decided to make my contribution and present a theological explanation based on the exegesis of a very particular surah from the Quran. I will humbly demonstrate that even if it was a divine punishment, it would not necessarily be aimed at a single community or members of a particular religion, but that the responsibility or the causes of these crises are much more general than we want to admit, and that I will do it from the Quranic text only. In order not to make it too long, I will not explain each verse in detail. This is reserved for courses given by Golden Chain Academy. I will only give a few points which will suffice to clearly understand this surah as a whole and which will demonstrate my analysis. The fact that this surah of the Quran could help us meditate on this global health crisis of COVID-19 is only my personal opinion. On the other hand, the explanations which follow from this surah are based on the most authentic sources and references of the exegesis of the Quran, but also the fruits of more than a quarter of century of study of theological texts and research with passion and devotion. The Quranic exegesis on this surah is based on a research method which was passed on to me by one of the greatest scholars of our time. This method is based on a research that spans more than 40 tafsir. 40 exegesis of the Quran. After saying this, the surah in question is surah number 96, which is made up of 19 verses. This surah has a peculiarity, which is the first 5 verses are the very first revealed in Mecca to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The rest of the surah was later revealed. I will come back to this fact and you will understand why I mentioned it. You may have guessed this surah known as Al-Alaq, which is translated by most versions of the Quran, the blood clot. Depending on its meaning, it can be divided into 4 parts. The first part of this surah would have the role of an introduction, and this until verse number 5. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. The first two verses mainly mention the existence of a creator, the origin of the human being, and the very beginning of his creation. The other three verses that follow clearly allude to the infinite generosity of this creator through his teaching and the evolution of the intellect of the human being. This privileges and differentiates him from all other known beings. All this thanks to the transmission of knowledge by writing and the ability to read after being in the most complete illiteracy and ignorance. The second part would go from verse number 6 to verse number 8. كلا إن الإنسان لا يطغى أن رآه استغنى إن إلى ربك الرجعى. This part deserves our attention more particularly. Verses 6 and 7 clearly mention the excesses of the human being, which would lead him to transgress the laws and exceed the limits which are not supposed to be crossed. This would be caused by his arrogance, which itself would be due to his feeling of self-sufficiency, which would have taken control of his mind. The human being in question would allow himself all the excesses. Today, we can see it in our daily lives without looking too much. I will insist here on the fact that the word used in Arabic is al-insan, to name the human being, not the members of a particular religion or community, but indeed al-insan, the human being. To also remember al of al-insan, which in the Arabic language brings an additional meaning to the word insan. In this specific case, excessive and transgressive behavior would concern the majority of human beings. The majority of human beings are meant by al, from the word al-insan. You will also notice that no other being is mentioned but only, again, the human being. This prompts us to meditate now and regularly on our daily actions and responsibilities. In order to control our impulses of pride or misplaced pride, which are devastating on our everyday behavior, especially in the midst of hardship. The word used to describe excess and arrogance is لا يطغى. In another surah, the same word is used to describe to Moses, peace be upon him, the behavior of Pharaoh in Surah An-Nazi'at, number 79, verse 17, with a difference of one letter. The word that is used is طغى and not لا يطغى. Concerning Pharaoh, why this difference? I'm not going here to enumerate everything that has been said on the issue, that would take us out of the subject. But what we can remember and mention here is the following. In the Arabic language, the la of la yatgha is intended to provide confirmation in the sense of the word to which it is added, which is not the case concerning Pharaoh in the verse mentioned above. The least that can be said is that this excessive and transgressive behavior would be more devastating when it is widespread at the population level than it would be on a personal level, even coming from a tyrant or a government. One can always meditate on the end of Pharaoh, known for being a proud tyrant, guilty of injustice against the children of Israel, and his arrogance with Moses and his brother Aaron, peace be upon them. We know from the Quran that Pharaoh died drowned in the Red Sea. I invite you to meditate on this historical fact. Regarding the rest of the surah, Al-Alaq, according to the most authentic sources, the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself asked the script to put the last 14 verses of the surah after the first 5 mentioned, as if to demonstrate the inadequacy of the arrogant and excessive behavior of the human being, knowing where he comes from and from whom he learned what he knows. I will go even further to say that even if we do not believe in God, we have no right to behave in this way, knowing that the knowledge and all the sciences that human beings have acquired may not have been possible only through the transmission of knowledge for generations and generations. As Isaac Newton said, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." So, humility must be the rule for everyone. Verse number 8, Inna ila rabbika ruj'a, reminds the human being of his return to the Creator. The rules of the Arabic language, which is, by the way, the only means of detailed and precise exegesis of the Quranic text. A translation can only give a general sense of the Quran, but that is not our subject. So, I said that the rules of the Arabic language allowed us to understand the return to God mentioned in this verse by a return to Him when we leave this world like death, but also a return to God in this life. This return to God mentioned concerns the spiritual and the temporal, as the existence of the human being and all that surrounds it. No one is exempt from this message, and every human being must meditate on their share of responsibility. How could we say the opposite when in this surah the word al-insan, the human being, is mentioned 3 times in the space of 6 short verses? According to one of the rules of the exegesis of the Quran, the Tafsir, the repetition of a word allows to emphasize the importance or the gravity of this word, or sometimes in order to answer questions that we could ask ourselves internally, or even doubts that the human being could have. The third part of this surah, from verse number 9 to verse number 13, أرأيت الذي ينهى عبدا إذا صلى أرأيت إن كان على الهدى أو أمر بالتقوى أرأيت إن كذب وتولى. These verses provide details of an incident between the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and one of his uncles known as Abu Jahl. These details that are reported on this incident should be seen as examples of injustice, gratuitous aggression, disrespect for everyone's rights, flouting of religious freedom, and more. Abu Jahl's behavior is much more than a historical fact. It is also an example not to be followed. This teaches us that this feeling of self-sufficiency and arrogance leads to the excess and to the transgression of the limits which are not supposed to be crossed, will cause the same consequences mentioned in the 4th part of the surah. Which brings us to the conclusion of this surah, which begins by reminding those who believe in the existence of God that all their actions are seen. أَلَمْ يَعْلَمْ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ يَرَى. Also, as stipulated in a rule of the Arabic language, the fact that this verse is formulated in an interrogation alludes to our indifference to the consequences of our actions. Also, for those who do not believe in God, can be included in this message. This is followed by a clear warning that if we do not refrain from engaging in this kind of behavior, which has been listed in this surah, we would risk provoking what would be the consequences of our actions. كلا لئن لم ينتهي لنسفعا بالناصية, which leads us to wonder what are these consequences. As I said at the beginning of this video, I will not explain all the details of each verse, but I will only quote the main points of this surah. The 2 verses in this last part of the surah mentioned these consequences. Verses number 15 and 18. كلا لئن لم ينتهي لنسفعا بالناصية and سندع الزبانية. Verse 15. كلا لئن لم ينتهي لنسفعا بالناصية clearly speaks of a forceful grip of the upper body referring to the head or the front of the head, as if to say from the Arabic language and certain exegesis that we would lose control of the other members of our body and therefore of our actions. I invite you to meditate on these details. Verse number 18, on the other hand, alludes to the sending off of something that would shake up our lives and push us repeatedly with force. The word zabaniya is used, even if certain exegetes explain this by angels. I prefer to insist on the sense of the word used in the verse at the linguistic and etymological level. So I will stick to what was mentioned regarding this verse and each of us to meditate. I would end with the last verse of Surah Al-Alaq. كلا لا تطعه واسجد واقترب. After the Prophet, peace be upon him, was threatened by his uncle Abu Jahl, this verse reassures him and announces him not to be afraid or even to worry about the execution of the threats made against him, and that he can continue to pray near the Kaaba in Mecca as he used to do. I would like to draw your attention to this last verse addressed to the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, which is translated as do not obey him, alluding to Abu Jahl, bow down and come closer. The fact that the word obey is used, an additional deduction to that which one understands at first sight of the verse is possible. This deduction is simply that God would not ask his prophet and messenger sent to all mankind to disobey Abu Jahl, governor of Mecca, if there was not already as established in the prophet, peace be upon him, mind that the citizens must obey the government and respect the laws established where in the country where they live, and that whether the governor is Muslim or not. But in this specific case, he is asked not to obey. I think that is enough for this intervention, which I wanted it short. I invite all those who are interested in the exegesis of the Quranic message to subscribe to our channel. We Golden Chain Academy have decided to post regularly Tafsir courses on our channel in English, French and Arabic,